This meeting, it is 10:31 and we are going to take roll. Looks like we've got Dan DeArmond, Dan DeLong, Reed Needles, Rod Phillips, and myself, BJ Preston, all in attendance today. It is March 17th, Tuesday. Thank you all for joining us today. We have one topic on the agenda for conversation today, and that is the pay of employees in accordance to what we currently have in place and the implementation of the time clock in order to track said pay. As we move forward in this, I understand that everybody has a lot of input to come into this. I am going to ask, please, if we can limit it to department heads only, I would appreciate that. Obviously, elected officials are included in that department head category in this circumstance. We are going to start out. I'm going to present the topic to the committee here and give each committee member a chance to comment before I open it up to any other comments. And I do ask that if you do have comments before the committee today, that you keep it to 5 minutes or less. I will help track that so that we're not here all day. And with that, I will open it up to committee members for anybody's questions, comments, and we will address those first, please.
More than a couple of comments, I have a couple of questions for you, Auditor. At the last council meeting, you said a couple of times that Safety Service Director Martin would incorrectly fill out his time card, and that the issue at hand was whether or not he was accruing holovac and vacation time at the proper rate. So first question, are we saying that if the safety director works 90 hours in a pay period, that he would receive more holovac or vacation time?
I appreciate the question, and the precedent set by practice in your pay ordinance says, irregardless, as overtime exempt employees, not salaried employees, they're overtime exempt, that they are to track their time and get the amount of time appropriate up to the time commensurate with an 80-hour pay period. So since they are overtime exempt, they wouldn't accrue any more vacation or sick time as part of that. So the issue is not the exception to it where they're working more. The issue is proper tracking in case they work less or as they use that vacation time, because at the end of a service period of service time, depending when it is, they can receive that payout as well as, so a payout on vacation is going to happen irregardless. A payout of sick time is going to depend on the circumstances around their departing from the city. And with me being informed by Mr. Martin himself that he wasn't filling his time card out correctly, and having a conversation with the state auditor's office directly, they've made it very clear to me as part of the audit process that I'm to account and he's to account for that time in a proper manner as best as he can. But because of those accruals, it's necessary that we get it in a digital format.
So your definition of incorrect is he's not using the ExecuTime card, or is
That's a great question. I appreciate that question very much. No, my definition of incorrect in reviewing Mr. Martin's time cards until this most recent pay period when this all was under light here in the community and the different ways that's happened, Mr. Martin had not taken one iota of any type of time, with the exception of entering regular eights into his timesheet since last May. And I'll let him speak to that, but we know that that's not correct. And we know, per conversations again with the state auditor's office, that there has to be a proper accounting of time for overtime exempt employees. We also know that from the Department of Labor, which is very, very important. This is not just a state issue, this is a federal issue as well, and that hasn't been addressed by Law Director Feiner, and I respect Law Director Feiner not wanting to weigh in on that. So by doing that, by him telling me, as your fiscal officer who's personally liable and responsible for proper accounting, proper management, and proper reporting of the books to the state and the taxpayers of the city of Findlay, I have a quandary. So my quandary it's a very simple one. If Mr. Martin, as he's arguing, doesn't want to record that time, the easy solution there is making him accepted, like the elected officials and the assistant prosecutors, and he just would not accrue vacation and sick time, and I wouldn't even need a time card at that point. Every 26 weeks we'll pay him just flat out. Or if he's going to continue to accrue, I can no longer accept his word that these are the hours he worked, so I just need him to use the system and swipe in, clock in, and to make that easy, he is already being paid $68 a month, over $800 a year to carry a phone. And if you guys require a demonstration, happy to do it. Ginger can show you. It takes less than 5 seconds to enter in your time. And if there will be arguments at some point that, oh, it's so inconvenient if I get a phone call at 3 in the morning or whatever, Ginger Sampson, our deputy auditor, does this day in and out, week in and out. She gets calls all hours of the day. Some calls are a couple minutes. Some calls are more than an hour. And she can very much explain how that's handled so we know it's fair and equitable.
Auditor, who controls what employees can clock in or out on their phone? Is that a department head or is that your office?
That's in limbo right now in the sense that we have, and the decision was made by my staff, and I supported it, so ultimately it falls on me, that as the system is being implemented, how each department and the people within that department could log in or out during the implementation period needed to be tightly controlled to minimize where we had to look when there was an error or an issue. I had a great conversation with Law Director Feiner probably 2 weeks ago, with respect to it is not the desire of my office or my staff to get into the administrative role. It's the administration's job to train their people how they're supposed to fill out time cards. It's the administration's job to train their people as to what type of time they're taking, what type of time they allow, and it's the administration's job to affirm that the time information as approved is accurate and proper. It's our job to receive that information in an accurate format, to ensure that the employees are paid properly, and to, where applicable, prevent and be in a position to minimize fraud to the city, whether intentional or unintentional.
So we've been keeping time the same way for 50 years, whatever. And then now, 5 years ago, we changed the system and now we have a lot of issues. So what has changed that the old system is no longer acceptable?
I'm going to address one part of that, and then I'll have Deputy Auditor Sampson address that. One of the disappointments to me in how this has been approached from down the hall is the desire to create the perception that there are all these issues. What my staff has done, and they've done very well, and put a lot of energy and effort and pride into, is they've gone and implemented this, and I guess I need to pass this out as well right before she talks to show you how far along we are. Department by department, in some cases, entities within that department, to make sure as things were done, they were done correctly, adaptations could be made where necessary, corrections could be made where necessary, so that we could move forward in a positive manner. And the best example I can give you of the silliness that's out there in the public eye is we're running parallels. What person would implement a computer system without paralleling with the old system, particularly with a finance system, until you're sure? So we ran the paper system alongside the digital system to ensure that it was correct, and we had all the quirks worked out that were possible to work out. And then we take people off parallels, and they're using the digital system alone. I'm going to let Ginger address that, but I'm going to give you this Gantt chart, which shows that we are almost complete with installing this throughout all the departments. And I'll let her address any concerns she feels she needs to address regarding that, with the exception of police patrol. And despite comments to the contrary, there's been nothing done in the fire department, with the exception of Ethernet lines being dropped, which needed to be dropped, not just for us, but for other things. Those were done. There's been no discussions, no attempts, no implementation, nothing. So I was amazed as to the comments to cause us to believe that there are issues there, and we can address how I feel. And I've already talked to Law Director Feiner and your chairman, BJ, as to how I think that might best be handled. I know it's not my purvey, but I did have a suggestion. So I'm going to bring you copies of this. And let Ginger address the rest.
Okay, the process of the time cards, we have been doing paper time cards literally for decades. There have been lots of comments made that we are behind the times. Paper is not something that should be being done anymore, particularly with our employment size. So we started looking to figure out what can we do differently. The system was chosen because it is an electronic system. It ties directly to our payroll system. It allows every employee to be able to see current time cards, previous time cards. It allows a consistent process for requesting time off. It allows for the transparency out there to be able to see at any point in time for any supervisor, for any employee, to be able to see what they have clocked in, what they have clocked out on, what they're getting paid on. In addition to the fact that they also get a pay stub. But they don't have to wait for their pay stub. They can see today whether or not what they clocked in as, whether it took it, whether it didn't take it, whatever it is. For an employment base of 350 employees to continue to keep doing paper is, quite honestly, is well behind the times. We live in an entirely different century of electronics. Why are we still doing this as paper? As things have changed, whether it be a contract or whether it be a union, whether it be a union contract or whether it be an ordinance, there have been lots and lots of things that have been added. They have to be then tracked. We are now at over 253 different types of pay codes. Most of the supervisors don't realize those pay codes actually exist. But when those time cards come up to us, our office has to then take a look at those paper time cards, figure it out, and figure out how to code it. It's a very manual process. In addition to that, we're also having to take a look at those time cards and figure out whether or not it conforms to a contract, an ordinance, state law, federal law, whatever it might be. That takes a lot of time to go through and try to figure these things out. So this process started with going through and finding a system that would work and would work well with things without having to worry about doing crosswalks to a different system or figuring out what we're going to do. Is the system perfect? No. No system's going to be perfect. We can't afford the perfect system. There's still going to be manual interaction because things are going to be weird. The problem that we have now is that we've worked through some of these things with departments. Did this take longer than expected? Absolutely. I'll be the first person to tell you that I did not intentionally think this was going to take this long. What we found out is going through some of these things and trying to work through the programming, and we had a lot of other things that are outside of our control too that I can go into later. But each department we sat down with to try to do parallels. And a parallel is you do the old system on paper, and then we also work through the electronic system. Those two types of things take time. Some departments flew right through the parallels. Some departments didn't catch on. So it takes a little bit, there's a learning curve. What we found out is there was a huge learning curve for those departments that the employees never filled out their own time cards. We have a lot of departments that the supervisors took care of the time cards, unbeknownst to the employees. What we found out as each department that we went to is there was little quirks that we didn't know about. And then we found out that all of a sudden there's a culture that we're dealing with, not just implementing a time card process. So through this process of doing implementations and trying to do parallels, we discovered a lot of things. But what I want to give you is a copy of all the different pay codes we have to work off of. Then I'm also going to give you a copy of what a parallel looks like with just one time card, one person. And I've taken off names and stuff like that. So we're not focusing on the name. We're not focusing on the department. We're focusing on the topics here. And then I'm going to give you a copy of, for example, the police department time cards. They had an old system that was electronic, that was in-house built many, many years ago. It has been tinkered with so many different people that know how to do programming or don't know how to programming or whatever else you might want to call it, to the point that this is really old technology and it's not working. However, the time cards come up to us and we spend a huge amount of time going through theirs just to try to make sure that we are paying these people correctly. Do we miss things? We absolutely do, because we're trying to determine stuff based upon somebody just saying that they worked 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever else, but we don't necessarily know what shift they're on. So we're missing things like shift differentials, or we're missing premiums, or we're missing other things. So this is what I'm going to give you next. Okay, so the first piece of paper, or first staple piece of it I gave you, were 5 pages of just all of the codes that we have to deal with every pay period. That's a lot of codes to have to know what the ins and outs of. All those codes are tied to things like either a type of tax, a type of pension, a type of accrual. Depending upon what it is, it all impacts something. The next section that I want you to look at has the yellow highlights on it, and it has a lot of handwriting. That is a paper time card. That is what our office was receiving for the majority of the departments. Everything that you see highlighted in yellow is something my office had to sit down and go through and figure out what's going on. Now, this was a parallel process, so the time card you have on top was the one that was what they've always been doing. The one that's behind is coming from what's referred to as the ExecuTime system. They've actually had a name change to time and attendance. This is coming from the time and attendance system. This has already been programmed. So as you can tell, because the person is clocking in and clocking out, it picks up based upon what shift they're on. It's supposed to automatically pick up whether or not they have a shift differential, whether they're on a holiday pay, whether or not, what kind of pay rate is it supposed to be at. From doing the paper time card, if you notice on the top one, we had to add on there's 2 codes on there that say DHP and DAD. That was double holiday pay and double afternoon shift differential because the person worked on a holiday. That wasn't presented to us from the department. We had to figure that part out. Now, looking at the examples, there's 3 examples of PD time cards. Notice all the handwriting on there, minus the supervisor's signature. That's all have to be done by our office in order to try to make sure that these people are getting paid the right codes, because the current system for PD does not work and can't handle any more programming to it to pick up all these codes. So what we've been trying to work through is these types of things so that the system will automatically pick it up. The issues that we've come across have been more challenging than we thought, because there's a lot of, first of all, we had a lot of problems with implementation through Tyler Technologies. We went through 3 different types of implementers. On top of which, what the contracts say versus what some of the practices aren't the same. A very simple example I can give you is they treat their overtime based upon an 8-hour or 10-hour day. Okay, but their contract says overtime doesn't kick in until it's a 40-hour week. Trying to program one thing based upon what we know, based upon then what the contract says, are 2 different things. So it takes a while to work through some stuff. It also takes a while to figure out what are you doing in practice versus what your contract or what your ordinance might say.
I'd like to pause Ginger there for one moment, if you'll entertain it. And it's just a simple statement. At no time in this process were we not cognizant and considerate of the administration's role when these things came up. And the result of that, which I'm sure Ginger will touch on in a bit, even ended up with a couple pieces of legislation coming to you folks, or the prior council, so things could be corrected. We understand where our lanes are and our guardrails.
So to kind of go along with this, and I'm sorry I'm going more than 5 minutes, but if you want me to shut up, I will. Okay, so I've got some notes written down, and I kind of want to go through some of these notes on here. So there has been a comment made that it would be a slap in the face for somebody like me to clock in and clock out. I do clock in and clock out because I am just accountable for my time to the public and to the taxpayer as any other employee. I'm no more special than anybody else. That follows with the fact that I earn accruals. That also follows along with the DOL saying that I'm supposed to be recording my time and accounting for my time because I'm a public employee paid by taxpayer dollars. In addition, Findlay's work week was established as being a Sunday through Saturday long before I've been here. What we found out when we were doing some of these things is, and on top of which, Findlay is also on a quarter-hour basis. We do everything on a quarter hour, which is one of the DOL accepted standards. There seems to be a lot of concern going with all these departments having to do with what the DOL refers to as the rounding rule. It is not something new. This rounding rule or rounding policy has been since the Great Depression, when people actually had the time clocks that went chunk, 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 chunk every time you went into them, because there would be a line of factory workers in there. So the rounding policy gives a 15-minute swing before and after the hour to make sure that it rounds up or whatever it is. This is not new. This policy has always been in place because we were on a quarter-hour increment. One of the things that we found out during implementation is not all departments were applying that correctly, not all departments were using it, or not all departments were using it consistently. So there has been a huge learning curve in that too. In addition to all of a sudden, employees are having to fill out their own time card basically via a time clock when they had a supervisor doing it. So it never started off to be detecting issues or catch issues. It was never meant to be a gotcha moment. What we have found out is by going through each individual department, well, how do I handle X? How do I handle this? And okay, explain to me what you're doing. So then we would go through the process of figuring it out. Some things we found out about, like Jim kind of alluded to, that, for example, we had employees going out and doing a specific task at the after-hours funerals or whatever else. They were being given time, regardless of exactly how much time that particular funeral was going to be. They were being given time. Well, okay, but nothing in the ordinance says we can just give you X number of dollars or X number of hours of time. So we went back to council after we identified each piece and said, okay, we need to add this into the pay ordinance now that says for these types of things, this is now what we're going to do. It corrected it. It made it so that we were in compliance with the state auditor's office. But in addition, though, we also found out things that were totally against DOL regulations, such as we had supervisors that were knowingly not recording overtime hours for their employees because they were flexing their time between weeks. You can't do that with a employee. A work week is an established work week. It is Sunday through Saturday. So what they would do is either they just wouldn't give them the overtime, or they would flex it between weeks. We've told them, no, you can't do that anymore. In addition to the fact, because you're also cheating the employee out of that extra half time. I don't care if it's based upon only a quarter of an hour that they worked over, you can't do that. We also had a number of other things that came about that we found out that they were just giving things like perks or whatever else, but they weren't actually working the time. And I'm not going to specifically talk about specific departments because that's not the point that this is. It's the things that we found out about. And I have a list of 18 things. I don't plan on going down through the list, but there were things that we learned in process of trying to do this. Some things were made public from the standpoint of we had to go to council and add it to a pay ordinance to get it fixed. Some things we talked to the previous HR person and said, hey, just so you know, this is going on. This got to stop in case you hear grumbling. Some things we just fixed and went on with life because we're just trying to get this thing done. We're trying to do it right. We're trying to do it correctly. And we're trying to make sure that all employees are treated fairly and equally across the board. There is a learning curve. Anytime you have change, it's hard. Change is hard. Change is not easy for me. But whenever you have change, there is processes that become hard for people to understand. But what we've found out through this whole process of going through these things is we've had people that were working overtime. Supervisors weren't letting them get the overtime, either claiming it either for comp time or overtime because it wasn't authorized. According to the DOL, if you worked it, you have to be paid it. Now, they can do something administratively on the back side of it, which I don't care about, to take care of that issue. But if they work the time, they have to be paid the time. So we've discovered all these different little weird things. We also have discovered things like people not wanting to claim their overtime because they were afraid they were going to get in trouble. That's not the way this works. We're going to have ourselves a major problem with the Department of Labor if we don't do things right. So in the process of implementing is how we learned all this stuff. It wasn't a matter of going out there and trying to figure out things that were going wrong. Now, there were complaints. There have been complaints about these parallels. Again, I showed you a parallel time card in front of you. They go through the parallels until we get through a pay period that, for the most part, doesn't have any issues. The parallel process is supposed to help the department learn how to use it, as well as help identify to us things that either need to be caught into the electronic side of it, or something else needs to be figured out or addressed. Again, some departments flew right through the parallels. They got it, they understood it, they whatever. Some departments had a really hard time with it. Now, again, that does come into a management process, not an auditor's office process. If you've got employees that forget to clock in or constantly forget to have their ID with them, I can't do anything about that. And then, yes, you are going to have somebody have to go ahead and fix their punches in the system. But on a management side of it, if my staff were forgetting their IDs every day or every other day, I'd be all over their cases saying, I'm not fixing your punches anymore. You need to remember to get your ID, or you need to go home and get it, because this is ridiculous. But that's a management thing. That's a decision I made for my department. That's not a decision I can make for anybody else. So again, none of this stuff was meant to be a gotcha moment. We never intended for most of this. I never intended for the big learning curve of these people trying to figure out how to do their own time cards. Most of the time what ends up happening in our office is I don't have time to just go out and audit for things and look for things and whatever else. Typically what happens is there's a situation that occurs. Something happens that ends up leading up to the fact that, okay, now we've got a problem. Now I've got to take a look into it and try to figure it out. For example, we found out some stuff having to do with the time cards, even after some departments had been implemented on the electronic system. We had a very simple issue that the paper time card itself that we could print off from the ExecuTime system was displaying a time that wasn't necessarily the punch time. So I started looking into it to try to figure out, okay, it's a display issue, it's paying them correctly, but what's going on? When I started digging through to figure out why it was, if it was a certain type of employee, a certain type of pay, or whatever else, is when I found out then we also had supervisors going into the system and changing people's time punches. That's a problem. Because again, we have a system that's supposed to be keeping track of this, but again, it goes back to this whole rounding policy thing. They're worried about this rounding policy, which is supposed to be, it's a DOL practice, it's a DOL thing. We're trying to do it and institute across the process the same. So trying to find one problem, trying to resolve one problem, found out another problem. Had a discussion, got it taken care of. We're done. But each time that there is a new ordinance, a new union contract, new whatever else, we have to analyze these codes and figure out which the correct codes are to put in the system and get them coded correctly. Is the system going to be able to catch every last code or every last punch? No. There's going to be weird things that happen. No different than any time when we chose to do a different financial system. Was it the absolute best perfect system there was in the world? No. But we found the best system that we could do without going backward in time. So the same type of thing is going on here. So from the very beginning of this too, we had discussions about within our office trying to figure this out. Then we had a more of a formal discussion. There was a council committee meeting to discuss this system. There was council legislation, and we did some implementation. We started the implementation process with the police department to begin with, because in their case, because of their timekeeping system was failing, the ExecuTime system has what we work with primarily is the time and attendance piece. There is another piece to it called advanced scheduling. We had demos, and PD and fire administrative staffs were there to be able to take a look at it. Fire opted to say that they didn't think it was going to work. PD chose that direction because we said, if you choose that direction, we will help you code it based upon it. If you choose something else, we're not coding it. We have our own other things to take care of. We went down the process of multiple different implementation meetings with somebody from Tyler to try to figure out how to program the stuff behind the scenes. You don't just turn it on and it just happens. There's codes you have to put in the system. So there were some things we had to build. There were some things the police department had to build. Nowhere during any of this discussion, during any of this, was there something that was said that you need to have union approval. We had union people involved in this process, and no one ever said anything. So this was kind of a shock here to come about to say, okay, all of a sudden we need to have union approval. This did take absolutely longer than I ever thought. I was really hoping this would have been taken care of and been done with. But we had a lot of things that were outside of our control. We started off, we had 3 different implementers. They didn't even get us started on the original time frame that we were supposed to be put on. We had a delay in trial of personnel that knew both pieces, the advanced scheduling piece and the time and attendance piece, to make sure everything hooked together on our side. We went through a server change through this whole process that was outside of our control. We had delays in the shipping of the time clocks. We had, you name it, one thing after the next. We also had delays in getting lines run because we didn't realize when we first started doing this, we knew we needed to have Ethernet cables on it. We didn't realize that there was a shortage of Ethernet capability in this building. I'll take blame for that. I did not know that. When we sat down with computer services and explained, okay, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to have. In the past, that's always been the department to take care of the Ethernet cables. It hasn't been us. It has always been that department, the department that has to take care of the technology. So we had to wait for a lot of lines to get run in order to be able to handle this, because we also knew that we needed to have clocks in various places. There are 3 different ways that someone can clock in on the system. They can go to the clocks, and then, by the way, the time clocks aren't just a time clock. They can also be used to access to be able to see time they've already taken. They can see their time cards. They can request time off through these time clocks. They're like little mini computers, but only specific for this piece. There are some people that have access to be able to do via mobile. Again, when we first started this, we tried to keep it low because we were trying to learn these pieces and parts. There is a mobile interface. There is a form that allows for somebody to request the mobile interface to get signed off on by the service safety director or hiring authority, depending upon if it's somebody else. We are trying to keep it so that we don't have the mobile interface necessarily be used by everybody because, again, from what we've learned, there's been some issues. They also have the ability to have a browser clock format so that if somebody does a lot of work from home or whatever else, they don't want to necessarily do it on a phone, we can have it be on a browser clock that it comes up on a screen. All 3 of them work the same process. They can clock in, they can clock out, they can see their time. We had, in our office too, and the processes of this too, we also had changes in payroll personnel. Okay, our primary goal, number 1, is to make payroll, no matter what. We had a person that was supposed to take the payroll position who resigned. We also had somebody who had retired in the process of this. Our focus first is paying people. When you bring somebody in to do payroll, it takes a while for them to learn the whole process. They need to understand how to do payroll before they can ever even work on something having to do with the time system. So yes, that was a delay. That was a delay on our office. Some of it we can control, some of it we couldn't control. So there was no way when we figured this out after doing pieces of it that we could have all these departments go live at once. Would that have been the perfect world? Was that what we were thinking we were going to be able to do? Absolutely. What we learned, there was no way. There was absolutely no way, especially after talking to each department and then figuring out the things that the culture. What we've figured out now is we're not only just trying to implement a time system to take care of these time cards so that we don't have all this handwritten stuff where we're taking a chance of inputting something in or missing something. We are also now changing a culture of, no, you can't necessarily do that. And it's not because I said so, it's because something else said so, and trying to make it so everybody is consistent across the board. When there are over 250 pay codes in the system to have to take care of, it takes a while to work through it. Some of them are very specific to the union contracts, some of them are not. But again, most of the employees out there probably really don't know that there's 250 codes out there that could be used to make their pay. So there has been challenges. I'm not going to say there hasn't been challenges. Do I want this thing done? Absolutely. But in the process of it, we also have to be very mindful of the fact that the state auditor's office is also watching us. So we've had multiple departments be on this system for more than 2 years, more than 3 years. Our office was one of the first ones. I figured if we needed to do this, we're going to go ahead and do this first. So yes, I do clock in and clock out. And actually, I'd rather clock in and clock out so I don't have to remember what's going on. In addition to, my time has been questioned in the past on the paper time cards. Some of you may realize that my husband and I farm. There's times I have to leave and go take care of that stuff. I get telephone calls when I'm in the tractor. I take care of the telephone calls. I get telephone calls at night. I get telephone calls on the weekend. People stop at my house, stop me in the grocery store, text me, call me, whatever else. There's a lot of things I get telephone calls for. Do I clock in every time? No, because I'm not trying to use that against my regular time. However, if after being in the tractor and or combine or truck or whatever else, I sit down at home to go ahead and work on the emails to try to make sure I'm trying to keep it up on that stuff, I clock in at that point in time because it's a designated period of time I'm trying to work on, I'm trying to get it done. So there is that way when someone's questioning, okay, I know you were gone, I know you were farming, I know you were doing this, I know you were doing that. I can now call up and show them on a time clock or a time card that I clocked in at 6:30 in the morning or whatever time it was, or at 10 o'clock at night. I can show them where I was working at. At the end of the week then, when I've had all this activity going on, I take a look at my week and figure out, okay, where am I short or where am I over? If I am over, I am overtime exempt. I don't get paid overtime. However, several years ago, we added into the pay ordinance a portion of a provision in there to be able to allow for discretionary time for public accountability for those people who are overtime exempt who do work more than 40 hours. It could be for a special project, it could be for whatever it is. That way, if they do need to, let's call it, flex their time from one week to the next or one pay period to the next, if they take time off the next week or the next pay period, they can take out of that discretionary bank. That discretionary bank was created. It was discussed with the previous HR person. The parameters around it were not decided by our office. They made the decision that it could be capped out at a total of 80 hours for overtime exempt people, and they can only take 8 hours per week off. You can put as many hours as you want in, but you're not going to take 80 hours off at the end. And part of that reason is because, again, many, many years ago, when we were allowing something very similar to happen, we had a person who was in a union position, in a safety force position, getting ready to retire, and he was basically writing out, it wasn't called discretionary time at that point in time, but he was basically writing out his discretionary time for almost 6 months, which slowed down the whole testing process. So there needed to be some sort of parameters around this, because the reason why he was writing it out is this time is also not eligible to be paid out. It's not overtime. It's a public accountability process. You see me on a tractor on a Friday or whatever time, and I have discretionary out, you see that. Now, on the weeks that I'm doing that kind of stuff, and for some reason I am short, I let the system look and see how many hours I have, and I'm either taking discretionary out or I'm taking vacation time to fill up the rest of my week. Because I'm accountable to the public, I'm accountable for my time, and I'm getting accruals.
BJ, can I wrap up with just a couple quick sentences? It'd be quick, I promise. Yeah, I just want to make sure that it's clear to all of you why council and why we're here. This was fully vetted in front of council through the committee process. In one meeting, the mayor flat out said, I'm for this, but I have a couple questions. And in the council meeting when it was passed, she flat out said, I have my questions answered and I'm very comfortable with this. The unions were involved, as Ginger said at the beginning, at least tangentially. The chiefs were involved, and the necessary employees have been involved all along. The most important question here is, to me, is that if we walk out of here today, I'd like to walk out of here with a resolution to how you'd like to handle Mr. Martin's time cards, whether he swipes in or whether he becomes accepted, so it's not necessary. And if we're able to solve that, that solves most things. The last thing I'd like to say is when this came out, it was shared with us that, and it's in the letter, I think, in your council packet, that the administration stated they wanted their people to stop using this, the supervisors. Well, it's very clear to us, and to their credit, all the supervisors, I believe, but maybe 2, are using the system. And I'm sure it's because of the ease of the system, the use of it, the accountability, and the fact to have those accruals. And to Ginger's point, we've all been through the ethics training. We all know what the state auditor requires, accountability for that payout. And that payout's big in some instances for those folks. It's a lot of money, and I'm sure they don't want to lose it. So everything here has been going wonderfully. And to the last point, that sheet in front of you, as you can see, almost every single department is closed out in using this system, with the exception of police patrol and the fire department, which hasn't even been touched, regardless of what might wanted to be presented. And lastly, Mr. Martin and his order for a couple people not to use it.
Unfortunately, Mr. Stashak, I don't think without a council meeting here we're going to be able to come out of this with a resolution, but certainly a recommendation is my hope. Committee members, anybody else have any questions or comments? In a moment, please. Yep.
Yes. In my background of being in retail, I was a salaried manager most of my career with two major companies, and I did not have to punch a time clock, but I did have to keep my records. And I think the city is very generous in allowing employees to carry over their vacation time. After 1 year, I earned vacation, and I could take it the next year. And then if I did not take that vacation during that year, I lost it. That also went with personal holidays. So I think the city is very, very generous in allowing the employees to carry over vacation, and not just 1 week, but depending on how long they've been here, how many weeks they can take. So I just, my comment is, I think that the city is very generous in that. I looked through the city handbook, and I couldn't find anything as far as clocking in or filling out time cards or anything like that. So maybe we ought to do something to the handbook. And I tried to find any specific ordinance regarding time card usage, and I didn't see anything on that either. I did find there were 3 cities in Ohio that do have time card ordinances, so there is such a thing as a time card ordinance. Bellevue, Ohio, whether one of their ordinances, they do not have to clock for lunch. They're basically scheduled 8.5 hours, and they're guaranteed a half hour for lunch, so they just give them 8 hours, so they don't have to clock in and out for lunch. I'm just trying to tell you what I've found. So I think as a whole, the city is very generous over the whole thing. But when the problem is when you accrue vacation and you keep it, and you don't say that you've taken any vacation, then that's a problem. So that's my comment.
Appreciate you all taking time. Just want to hit on a couple of quick items. First and foremost, I want you to reiterate the point that the administration is supportive of the system overall. The main issue that we have a problem with is that it's great that they acknowledge that management has responsibility and authority to determine all these things. However, in practice, that is not how this system has been rolled out. Going back to 2021, I'm not going to give you the whole history, but in short, I requested meetings with the department heads, with them coming in, showing us the system, having that discussion, and they flat out refused. So the issue is that we are responsible for managing the department operations, determining with them how to implement the system, but we've not been given the access and ability to do that. What really should have happened 5 years ago is that they said, hey, we want to implement this system. We would have sat down and demoed it. The department heads would have seen it. And I would have loved for all of our departments to then map out how they keep time and attendance within their departments. And then we could have modified that system even before the implementation occurred. Again, that's not what happened. So now we are to this point where the administration is saying, hey, we are continuing to hit barriers. We need to work through this in the best interest of the city. We don't need to be playing these political games, and unfortunately, that's what it's turned into. Additionally, Mr. Martin wouldn't be sitting here behind me if he was fraudulently over-reporting his time to the city. That would be completely unacceptable. You know, the auditor pointed out that he hasn't taken much vacation time. You're right, he hasn't, because he's been working all the time, and, you know, he had a vacation with his family last week. And those things are appropriately reported. The reality is he is working far and above what is being paid. He is reporting his hours as necessary, and it doesn't make sense for him to clock in and clock out. And because of this situation, we finally kind of put our foot down and said, don't do it, because we need to have this conversation. And unfortunately, the conversation hasn't been able to be had. So we need to address, how is the system implemented? Where does the management authority lie? And how do we resolve this moving forward? And you are correct that the fire department has not implemented, because they raised back in 2021 the issue saying this is not going to work for us in how it is being proposed. We would like to work through it. The auditor's office proceeded without consulting them further, except for a meeting where they were limitedly able to say, hey, this is a system we're implementing. I'm not looking for your feedback. This is what it is. So there has been a number of issues. So that is all I wanted to say, is that we are supportive of this system. The issue is that the auditor's office has cut management and administration out of being able to do our job. And we are ultimately responsible for, one, yes, ensuring things are appropriate. The auditor this morning mentioned to me these 18 issues that have occurred. They haven't been presented to the administration in a documented fashion for us to address them. I can't fix problems that I'm not aware of. So trying to throw those in our face at the last minute is also inappropriate. I have asked, Human Resources Director Hazlitt to kind of lay out some information, and a number of department heads are here. I would like to get to them so that they can get back to their otherwise scheduled work. But I don't know if there are any questions for me real quick before we get into that.
Mayor, for the record, I know Safety Service Director Martin to be a very hardworking, conscientious individual. I'm sure the number's probably closer to 100 hours a week. I just wanted to be very clear about what the inference was from the auditor's office, just to get it on the record. I would be amazed if it wasn't more than 100 hours a week. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Very good. Is it all right? Yep.
Hi, just a couple things. So first I want to say, for me, I'm not a political entity. I'm not an elected official, obviously. So for me, this isn't a political dispute. This issue concerns my office, Human Resources, because it's a governance issue, who has authority. It's a compliance issue concerning labor laws and internal controls. It's an operational issue. What's the impact on employees and departments? And it's a risk liability. There's grievances, audit findings. It comes back to that risk issue. And I want to reiterate what the mayor said is absolutely no one wants to go back to paper. This isn't the dark ages. We need to move forward. But before a system can be imposed, anytime you change a process, or in this case, a timekeeping system, 3 questions have to be asked and answered, in my opinion. 1, does it meet audit standards? 2, does it comply with labor contracts? And 3, does it fit operational needs? In this instance, I think 2 of the 3 questions were never asked or addressed by the auditor's office. I think the auditor unilaterally imposed a system without proper collaboration with the administration. A system like this takes joint collaboration. They each have a side in the roles as far as paying employees and keeping track of their time and attendance. And so for me, if a payroll system can accept multiple input methods, whether that be a time clock, manual entry on a time clock, an Excel upload, you name it, right? There's systems out there that do all of that. The auditor's role is to ensure the system processes the hours correctly, not to restrict the method used. We don't even know what this current system is capable of, because the auditor has refused to discuss how it can be used to better fit our city's departments. Like I said, it requires a joint implementation. Doesn't matter if the other side implemented something jointly, I'd be up here saying the same exact thing. It's going to take administration and payroll, in this case the auditor. They have to decide and implement the system jointly. And you'll hear from department heads that just was not done. I was part of a meeting in November with myself, Service Safety Director, Law Director, and the auditor. And my understanding and what the law director sent out in an email was that we were there to discuss what the capabilities are within this current system, because it's not working. Or maybe it is, but there's a better way to use it, right? We don't know. At that meeting, I'll be really honest and blunt. I think the auditor showed up. He refused to have an open dialogue about how the system does and does not work for operational needs. He wouldn't answer any questions, and he literally walked out and refused to engage in conversation. And that's not the only time that non-cooperation or outright obstruction has, in my opinion, occurred. And so I think, for me, my recommendation is that this should just involve professional collaboration. It should have happened a long time ago. You can't implement a system without talking to everyone involved. You can't come in and say, here's what you're using, end of story, no input. That just can't happen. It's why we're here today, right? If we would have just sat at the table and had a real conversation 4 years ago and said, hey, does this work for your department? Fire, does it work for you? Police, does this work? Administration, this is what we want to do. Again, no one wants to go back to paper. There are good things about time clocks and timekeeping systems that we need to use. But again, if proper and honestly professional collaboration can't happen, then I think that's why we're here. Unfortunately, it's going to be council's job to clarify authority in writing about what the different roles are and how to move forward with that. I just wanted to say that piece. Thank you. I'm sure there's other department heads who'd like to say something too. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Before we proceed with any other comments, you're good. Thank you. Mr. Stashak, question from myself. Who currently has administrative access to this electronic payroll system?
Administrative access as far as everything across the system?
Who can make changes to the system as a whole?
System as a whole is our office. Now, as far as being able to actually make modifications to specific time cards for people, each supervisor has the capability of making those changes to their individual departments.
And who specifically within your office has the ability to make changes with the payroll process or with the software company?
Our two payroll people.
Our
payroll person and our payroll support person.
And who are those two people? I'm sorry, I don't know.
Tara Kramer and Andrea Kingsbury.
Okay. So Tara and Angela are the only two people that currently could call the software company and say, I need these changes made. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
I would like to hear from the department heads, personally.
Can I do one thing first?
You bet. It's your meeting.
Department heads don't think that I'm not going to give you your opportunity, but before we get there, I just want to present it to the committee that currently at this time, what I would like you guys to consider are two different recommendations that we come out of this meeting with. And as we hear from department heads, maybe keep that in mind and see if there's more. Recommendation number one that I would like to bring out of this is to have the law director draft a resolution to council to amend the ordinance 2025-129, which is the current salary ordinance, to make employees as described in the unclassified section 2, to make those employees accepted and be paid within accordance of section 6. They would also stop accruing benefits. They would have a lump sum of benefits that they could use over a year period. They would still be able to, with following the ordinance, be able to roll those over or accumulate them from year to year as it's laid out in this document, but they would not accrue them based on hours. My second recommendation that I would like to have the law director draft, or recommendation to have the law director draft a resolution to council to give access to human resources for admin responsibilities in this payroll software system and place it in the human resources department to implement the use of the time clock in all departments to be reported to the auditor's office. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Well, that first one blew by me.
So, as the auditor had mentioned when we first started this, there is a group in section 2 of the salary ordinance that is called unclassified. They are currently salaried, but they are not what the city calls accepted, meaning that 40 hours a week is not just accepted. So by making that group of individuals accepted, they would be basically assumed 40 hours a week. Now, their vacation and everything would still be used in that.
So in this category of unclassified?
Section 2 category, to read through it quickly. Officers elected by the people, directors or heads of departments, officers and members of boards, commissions. Appointment is subject to concurrence by council. one administrative assistant to each elected officer, one assistant to
Okay.
the deputy auditor.
Okay, all right, so it's a pretty
It's-
it's a pretty substantial group.
It is,
Okay,
and currently outlined in.
okay,
in
so these are unclassified currently, and we're gonna make them what? We're
going to make them accepted.
okay, we're unclassified, now they're accepted, okay.
They would still be unclassified. It's just that that group would have the additional title of accepted put
And
onto it.
once they're accepted, what does that mean?
That means that they are assumed, they no longer turn in a time card. They're assumed 40
Oh.
hours a week.
Oh, okay,
The only thing they would report would be vacation, holiday, or any other paid hours outside of standard hours.
makes sense, thank you.
And we would also then put into there with this resolution that they no longer accrue their benefits based on an hourly calculation. They would accrue them annually in a lump sum.
Okay.
Any more questions on my two recommendations that I plan to move forward with?
Amy has a bit,
All right, I will open it up to you. Amy, we'll start with you, please.
And actually, the auditor may be able to address this, but I just want to clarify, an accepted employee does not earn vacation or sick time. Is that correct?
That is correct. An accepted employee does not earn vacation or sick time. So for your proposal here to talk about not having those people accrue, you're talking about a huge group of employees who are supervisors who do have a bank of sick time or do have whatever that they are planning on retiring to get that severance payout. By making that change, you might cause a unintended consequence.
The resolution, as I'm hoping to present it, would not take away anybody's accruals as they hold them currently. It would only say that moving forward on their anniversary date, they would get a lump sum. So if your accruals based on 40 hours a week added up to 80 hours of vacation throughout a year at 40 hours a week, then on your anniversary date, you would be given that 80 hours of vacation on that date to be used through that year, but the year-to-year accruals would not change, so they would still be able to bank, as you call it, the hours that are left over at the end of the year, up to the maximums as described in the salary ordinance.
What is your intention to handle, or how's your intention to handle the sick time accrual, though? Because that does not have a cap to the accrual on it. That's the concern.
I think we need to address that then. And I think it can be the same as the vacation. We can put what we think is reasonable as a maximum amount of hours in a year to be used as sick time for those employees.
If I may,
Go ahead.
Ginger. Okay. Again, I just want to make sure, because accepted, that's something that I'm not an expert in what accepted means without some research. But again, they're not accruing any hours. And so our department heads would not earn sick or vacation time, ever.
Perhaps a better way, and again, this is the first I'm hearing of this proposal, so I think we would just have to work through with Amy and the law director and auditor's office. Perhaps rather than accruing as it is on a daily basis, if it's just based off of the pay period, then you are getting a little bit more of that actual processing. Because right now, the argument gets thrown around that, well, we need to know every single day what they worked because they're accruing it based off of that day worked. Well, technically, until it's processed on their pay date, maybe that would be a way to approach it. So I'm willing to work through that, but I do agree that the way that it was initially just stated would be very problematic in how we make sure to take care of our department heads and other individuals that fall under that category.
Ginger, as I read through this salary ordinance, it looked like there was a cap to how many hours can be accrued on any given thing. Is that true with sick time?
That is not true with sick time.
Does it count on overtime hours?
For overtime, it does not count. For comp time, there is a ordinance limit, and there's also a Department of Labor limit. For vacation, for any employee, that is capped based upon how many hours they're accruing per year. For sick time, it makes a difference as far as when they retire. Sick time is something that is given via the Ohio Revised Code. It's so many hours for every 80 hours work or a proration thereof. The concern would be that if you're planning on stopping the sick time, either bank or accrual for sick time, because that's, again, it's ORC thing, the ordinance had been modified to talk about people who were either hired on or before August 21st, 2003, or hired after August 21st, 2003, based upon the number of hours they have in their bank, how much they can be paid off on as a severance. So that would have to be taken a look at, because otherwise you could be truly creating an unintended consequence of doing something with the sick time accrual. But as Amy has stated, though, accepted don't get any accruals. So it doesn't matter. There's no time card. There's no nothing. If they are accepted, like the assistant directors of law or the Civil Service Commission, they just get paid whatever it is. It doesn't matter if they worked 1 hour or 100 hours in that time frame. They just get paid. So there needs to be a little bit more discussion or figuring out what exactly it is you're trying to do, so we don't have an unintended consequence that might cause another problem.
I appreciate your approach and the suggestions, and if you do that for the first part, you're satisfying what I need in terms of the protection of my bond and my obligation as the fiduciary of the city and my personal liability. With regard to the second part, I'm a little disappointed in the portrayal of me by the administration, and it's BS, but with regard to how we move forward, I would caution you to consider at what point that happens or in what manner, so that we can ensure compliance, interfacing with the system, and that everything is in place. Because probably, and Ginger could talk about it more if it was important to you, we've had in the past and currently a lot of challenges in making sure systems work with our office properly, systems that are cloud-based work with our office properly, so that we can meet audit requirements. And the integration and her approach to these things has been exemplary. And I don't think we want to discount that. There are certain things, like workers' comp in the past, when the administration wanted it, take it. It's easy for us. But this would be one where I would caution you very much that there's a reason it's in my office. We are the paymasters for the city. We are compliance with regard to pay. And it is this office, our office, which has identified these multiple issues, very serious issues in terms of how things were handled.
All right, at this time, Mr. Feitner.
Sort of now seeing the direction this may be going with a theory you folks might have for resolution, it would be my advice that Amy Hazlett, myself, get a good understanding of what maybe you're looking for as an end result here to remedy this, and then allow for her and I, and if we need any outside sources, to be sure that it's compliant with all laws, state and federal laws, but also that your intentions don't have any consequences. And based on what you want to do as a resolution, allow Amy, because she's very knowledgeable, to maybe send you back an idea as well that may satisfy the end result you're looking for without major changes in what's already in place. I would just make that suggestion.
Thank you.
I have one other comment with regard to that, and it's separate but tangential in an important way. I had many long conversations with the prior council, particularly Mr. Wolbser and Mr. Essex when he was here as our HR director. There is an organizational flaw in our structure in that HR is beholden to the political office of the mayor's office. And your income tax, the mayor appoints and recommends who the income tax head is, and it's subject to board authority. You might consider in this situation a similar or unique structure where HR isn't appointed and at the behest of the mayor's office, in the sense that, and this is not to belittle either of those offices, it's to allow for very independent operational focus and priorities with regard to HR, independent of influences that could be of concern. Because we do have challenges in our offices. There have been some issues, and Don Essex was very understanding when we couldn't come to HR. We couldn't do some things because of the relationships between the two offices. So I would encourage this council to explore that in the very near future with regard to these issues.
Thank you. Any department heads wishing to address us today? We'll start with the fire department. Is your red light on?
No, it is.
There we go.
So I had a very long statement written that I had planned on reading because I put a lot of thought into, way too much thought into this. And I've tried to pare that down so we're not here listening to me for 12 minutes. So if it's kind of choppy, forgive me for this. So to give you a little bit about my background with regarding this and some other software issues. I've been heavily involved in evaluating and vetting different types of software owned by the Tyler Technologies Corporation as well as other companies for the last 11 years. Tyler, if you remember, owns Munis. They own our public safety software. They own ExecuTime, time and attendance now. All those different divisions don't necessarily work together. The financial division is the financial division. Public safety is public safety. Also, I've been on the fire advisory board for the Tyler Technologies Company since like 2020. So that gives me some access to other fire departments across the country as well as other Tyler product specialists within that company. So this ExecuTime issue has been going on since like 2021. I've been researching it on and off since then to fully understand this issue, and this is what I want to be clear. What I've learned anyway is we keep talking about time clocks and ExecuTime. To my knowledge, those are two separate things. You can use what we'll call ExecuTime, which is time and attendance. To my knowledge, that's the software. That's the time and attendance software. The time clocks is a separate issue that you can use the software with or without those. So I want to make sure that that's clear to everybody, and I believe that's the case. I've talked to other municipalities that use ExecuTime. I've talked to Tyler corporate executives who said you don't need to use punch in, punch out time clocks to use ExecuTime. So I think that's important to realize. I've been told that ExecuTime is fully customizable, which can be used with or without time clocks. I think the software is probably good. I really do. And I don't think there's any department heads here, the administration is certainly not against it. Using software to our advantage, I think we're all on board with that. Making things more efficient, we're all on board with that. The implementation and rollout of this project was not good. It wasn't. And I'm not saying it's 100% the auditor's office fault. There were some changes we did. If you remember, there was a pandemic going on as well. There were changes in the Tyler implementers. So all that stuff goes into it. But really one of the biggest issues, there were two big issues in my opinion. One, the auditor's office never told us what problem they were trying to solve by getting this software. And I think that would have helped us really all come together and try to come up with a solution. Second of all is they didn't get any input from department heads on how it would affect operations and the different nuances between schedules or work processes or workflows. There just wasn't that back and forth. And, they mentioned a demo that myself, the police chief, we were in there, and that they're right. There was a demo with the Tyler folks on this advanced scheduling software, but that meeting started with them telling us that they didn't want our input. And they said that this is the software we're going with. We don't want your input. We don't want your feedback. We just want to know if you're going to use the advanced scheduling software or not. That's how the meeting started. So as a department head, how are you supposed to take that, right? They don't want our input. So we were also told that all departments, regardless of unique aspects of their schedules or their workflow or their processes, we're going to use ExecuTime and the time clocks and essentially be under the same rules. I was very concerned with that because fire department does have a very unique schedule. 24-hour schedules. We have Kelly days. Nobody else has that. There's a lot of unique aspects. And through my position on the Tyler Fire Advisory Board, I asked them, I said, can you give me examples of other cities, other fire departments specifically, that are using this software? And they couldn't provide any examples at that time. And this is a nationwide company. They couldn't provide any examples of fire departments that were using this software. And the Tyler folks themselves told me that specifically for fire department schedules, ExecuTime wasn't built for schedules like that. And that time clocks and things like that just weren't a thing in full-time fire service. And I agree. I teach a lot of classes, and I asked everybody if you're a full-time fire department, do you use time clocks, something like that? Do you use a software for this? And some of them use an electronic timekeeping software, but nobody's ever said they use a punch-in, punch-out system. It just doesn't work. Oh, yeah, sorry. So last, I wanted to look at, because I knew it wasn't going to work for us, I wanted to look at other options. So locally, I talked to 4 different agencies from Hancock County, because Hancock County uses the same software that we use for payroll. They use Munis as well, right? So I talked to 4 different county agencies of different sizes, from 2 people up to 80 people, and asked them how they did this. Because some are elected, some work for the commissioners. There's a lot of different types of organizations in county government. And they all use a different system to input their work hours into the same Munis software that we do. Some of them use a direct import from an Excel worksheet. Some people manually get in there and do it. Our Munis software, I believe, I've learned through this process, is it has a lot more capabilities than we've ever been able to use or even access. The landing page that I have access to is, is completely different than what a county department head has access to. He can get into the payroll module and he can directly input his employees' work hours in there. There's a lot of.
Thank you for your input. Any other department heads? Hi. Forgive me, if you could start with your name and department, I would appreciate it. I'm new here.
Heather Eigel, I'm the clerk of courts for the Findlay Municipal Court. I've been employed with the court and city for 26 years, so I've seen paper time cards, I've seen the punch-in. The court has been on it, ExecuTime, since June of 2024. We ran a parallel of just about a year. Previously, all employees filled their own time cards out, so they were already familiar with that. While the court understands the importance of administrative oversight and fiscal accountability, at no time did the auditor or his staff consult with the judges or court administration on what was best for our department or whether we anticipated any operational challenges. As you know, the judiciary is a co-equal branch of government. There's 3. Administrative mandates imposed by legislative or executive branches regarding the daily management of court staff can raise concerns on separation of powers. The court must retain authority to manage their personnel in a manner that best serves the pursuit of justice. In my department, the chief probation officer, myself, our full-time magistrate, and our judicial assistant supervisor were all salary employees. We are compensated very well by our bosses. We are on call 24/7, 365 days a year. The demands of court administration require work during evenings, weekends, holidays, vacations, when we're home sick, if we have sick children. We get calls from law enforcement, the jail, CCNO, the judges, and court staff. And this is all for timely administration of justice. for example, during the snowstorm on Sunday night, the judges conferenced with the three of us administrators about closing the court. That includes canceling probably 150 hearings that were on Monday morning. We met for about a half an hour on that, and then the three administrators had to do computer stuff, contact the media, contact the staff, which we all spent probably an hour each. We're salary. That's the nature of our position. And like I said, our judges have compensated us very well for it. Last year, I was called in August by the sheriff that the jail AC went out, middle of July. If it gets too hot, they have to move inmates because that's a problem for him. So I spent about 90 minutes on a Zoom call with county officials about potentially moving inmates, and then reported back to Judge Hackenberg whether or not we were going to have to issue entries to get people out of jail to conduct this if the sheriff needed us to. We take half an hour lunches because our hours aren't 8 to 5 at the court. They're 7:30 to 4:30, 7:30 to 5:30, and on Fridays we close at noon. So Friday afternoons, I check my emails. 2 weeks ago, I had an email from an attorney. I responded to it, looked in the system, and dealt with that so he wasn't left hanging for the weekend. I get interrupted on my lunches. That's, again, the nature of my position. If I'm coming back from lunch to go clock in, because I clock in and out just like everybody else, if I get stopped by a judge walking back from lunch, I'm not like, just a second, need to go do that. I answer his question, I deal with the attorney in the hallway, I deal with the defendant that needs something. If I don't make it back to the time clock by 12:22 and it rolls to 12:23, I now have to either use 15 minutes of vacation or I have to stay an extra 8 minutes so I can take care of that rounding problem. Our judicial supervisor gets called for website issues after hours, for courtroom recording problems. He's been on vacation for the last week and has been called twice about recording problems. So again, that's the nature of our positions. We understand that. One other problem that I'll bring up when it comes to accurate, 2 weeks ago, I had a 25-year-old deputy clerk come in Thursday morning in tears. She checked her direct deposit for that morning, and her paycheck deposit was $305 for 80 hours. She was only paid for 13 hours. So immediately I look at the ExecuTime program, and we submitted for the full 80 hours like she should have been paid for. So I called upstairs. I'm like, hey, I got a problem. Her paycheck's wrong, blah, blah. So it was fixed. She got the rest of her paycheck the next day, which is fine. I appreciated the timeliness to get it taken care of. There was no explanation as to what the problem was, if it was the time and attendance program, if it was the Munis problem. I don't know what the problem was, but the stuff was put into the system correctly, and she wasn't paid the correct amount, which for a 25-year-old with 3 children and a husband, that could create some problems. So I will say the system works. There's a few tweaks that could be made. It does work for hourly staff. Salary, I'm not really sure. But had there been any communication or collaboration, we could have taken care of all of this stuff prior to now being here in this council meeting. Thank you. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Chief Matthias, Police Department.
Hello, I'm Jim Matthias. I'm the police chief. My view is a little bit different. I've been on this since the very beginning. I hate that it's us versus them. I don't mean it to be an us versus them, but I guess the good versus the bad or the pros versus the cons. Initially, when the police department was asked about it, a big proponent, yes. We've been doing the handwritten schedules for years. If you worked in patrol division, which is the worst for electronic scheduling and everything else, we wanted that for years and years ago, prior to even to leading to this conversation. So we wanted it. It had to work, obviously, with Munis, and that's where the parameters kind of narrowed in, and that. So it had to work with Munis, which understandably so, but it limited the capabilities and what program to work. Once we started going towards to Tyler Tech and ExecuTime and time and attendance. On the PD side, very frustrating. Tyler Technologies is a very good program, but on the back end, on support and the services, not so much. We see it in our reporting system and our CAD. We do nothing but fight with those folks. Again, it's a good system, but there's a lot of errors, and what led into the initial purchase and the training is the same thing. We had training scheduled with the folks with Tyler Tech. Some meetings happened, some didn't. They were all by Zoom because, again, with COVID. And then unfortunately, through the auditor's office, everything started out with an employee that was on her way out for retirement and is no longer here now to work out any odds and ends. But Tyler Tech asked for very limited amount of information with the police department. As you know, we have union members and we have non-union members. But the union members, there's very specific languages. They've already been discussed as far as shift differentials, the different pays, holiday pays, call-outs, call-in pay. So all those play a factor when it comes to police department, especially with union employees. Yes, we talked about how that affects union employees. So our union employees is all of our patrol division, our sergeants, our lieutenants, and our dispatch. The only ones currently on it are dispatch. Patrol is not on it. Our special service folks are not on it. And our general detectives are not on it. It works well for a 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. Outside of that, it's nothing but frustrations. Our administrative secretary, she's been very cordial in the whole process, but it's taken almost twice as much because we're doing the old pay, and we're doing the new pay, and there's problems with both. Pay codes has been an issue as far as getting the hours within a pay period, shift differential within a pay period. People are earning time on a day that they work, and then there's problems that come up when it's time to code those in and that. And do the sergeants and the lieutenants have the right access, authorizations, permissions, whatever you want to call it? Those seem to change from time to time, and it's a thing that's been working out. But for 5 years, we have 26 people out of the 88 full-time employees that are on the system. To say that it's working, but it's been frustration after frustration. And I'm not going to see the end result. I'm out soon, but it's not fair to the other people that are here. It's not fair to the union members. They weren't part of the conversation. They got brought into it because of implementation and that the dispatchers that are working the schedule and doing the system. So they're taking the brunt of it because they're trying to protect all of the union members, and not all the union members are affected other than they're supposed to be clocking in and clocking out. But the parallel system was extremely long from getting everybody on board. Command staff and non-union members were the first to go onto that system. And it's, like I say, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. It's not an issue in that because it doesn't go into these extra pays and that. Also with when we did purchase Tyler Tech, there was 2 different versions. So there was the advanced scheduling, which incorporates basically our schedule, the fire department schedule, and then the basic, which is the Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So knowing what Tyler Tech had to offer, we've been dealing with Tyler Tech. They've had Munis for I don't know how many years, but obviously well before this time. We thought it was beneficial for the police and or fire to do the advanced scheduling. It was money that was left over in the initial Tyler Tech purchase for basically our police department for the reporting system and the CAD that was used to make that purchase. So looking forward, it was the best purchase to be made to make sure that everything works, but it's still not working after 5 years. This book was what was presented here in January. It's additional training information on the system and some training hours that are becoming up with employees and with department heads. But again, that should have been something that should have been a constant through the whole process of the 5 years. We had the in-person sessions. Some happened, some didn't. Some were good, some were very bad, to be quite honest. But again, that was part of Tyler Tech. We knew that going into that process. I have a whole list of different things as far as things that do work, don't work. I'll hit just the major ones. We've had 2 MOUs that's concerning our union employees that went into effect with this current contract. Those were specifically related to time and attendance. Things that still aren't working is basically the same thing we talked about with shift differentials and pays within a pay period, and specifically the day that it's working. If a person's working midnight shift, it counts it as 2 days. It should be one solid 8-hour or 10-hour shift. It counts it as the day that they started and the day that they stopped, and that's a known issue and still not working right. Vehicle use for those that has vehicles that drives it for emergency response, whether here at work or a response from home. Those have to be manually inputted on a daily basis, and other different pays. So we have an assistant TAC in dispatch. That person has to be inputted for those hours each day that they work those hours. It's just, I say it over and over. The more we get into it, leading into patrol, the more problems that we've had. That's where that parallel runs into it. But again, it's leading into more problems, and that's why patrol hasn't issued. The next conversation was making sure detectives were the next ones on, and then special services. And we had to basically say, until we start adding more people, we have to fix the problems that we have currently. So we have stopped at detectives, special services, and patrol is our last ones. But again, 26 of the 88, or 27 of the 88, are currently on, and after 5 years, can it work? It could work, but it doesn't appear to be at this time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Chief, thank you for your comments. Are you running any parallels now with the other units? Because we were given an project timeline.
Well, any other parallels could be considered as patrol division. I mean, they're clocking in and out to show their time. So I mean, in theory, yes, that parallel is still going on, but that's been going on since basically all of the union members were coming in board, and it's a matter of time, hitting the time clock. So our union members put out a social media post on that, which very appreciative, but kind of got a little bit on the wrong topic and that, but I do appreciate their post. But after 31 years of being here, never punched a time clock, I'm probably the biggest violator of punching a time clock. So discretionary time, everything else goes into the fact. I understand the part of the electronic system, but yeah, it's
Well, our information shows no parallels running for patrol.
I don't know that that's true. I think we've been running parallels. It's been I mean, we're trying to do that, but we're nowhere close to run patrol as an actual clock in and clock out at this point. And stuff.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
We have just one more brief, if you don't mind. Just one more.
I'm Dave Hantz with the Public Works Department. I'll kind of talk to you on as far as the service side of it. When they come down with this, and we were told, hey, they're going to come to our shop, they're going to put these in, auditor's office is going to come down and train us. I said, okay. If Uptown wanted it and the auditor's office wanted it, it was my job to get it through to the guys. Also, I feel it's in my job, and I will stand behind it. I've been here for 30 years, okay? I cannot retire because of my age. I got 7 more years to go before I can leave here. But I will fight for every one of my guys. Those guys that work underneath us, for you, is my job to take care of. And if it wasn't for them, none of us in this room would be. So a lot of the examples that they gave you of not following the rules, I'm your guy, okay? I don't care. I will stand here and defend everything that I did wrong, okay? I was told this is not to change operations. So when an employee takes a 31-minute lunch, change operations, I'm not docking them 15 minutes of vacation. I'd get on the computer, I'd back them up to 30. When they would take a 29-minute lunch, again, I'm also for the city. I'm not paying them 15 minutes of overtime. I'd get on the computer and I'd change them. I was not changing operations. I am one of them that take my truck home and I'm on 24-hour call. I have it on my phone. I was told when this started, you get a call from PD, you go to your truck, clock in, you go. Okay, that's what I do. We were on it for, I think, 6 months. maybe less. I was called downtown because they tracked my location. They says, you weren't at your house when you clocked in. You were on the next street over when I come up to Main Street. My explanation to that was, yes, my internet, my street, my internet does not pick it up. I take it over. They says, well, when you left the shop, you went over the railroad tracks on Corey Street. You clocked out. I said, yes. No, you have to do it in the building. So those are my issues. Another issue that I had was, like I said, if a guy's, and I've been here for 30 years, and I just not pick up on this stuff on my own, I had multiple bosses. If we work 12-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts, and you're supposed to get off at 7 in the morning, quarter till, you tell the guys thanks and you move on about your day. No longer can we do that. That's fine. I can follow your rules, the rules, whatever it is. But when it's Christmas or Thanksgiving, we got together and the guys are like, we don't get the extra time anymore. Do you support working through lunch this week? And then we leave at 1 o'clock. I said, absolutely we do. This is operations. This is what I'm in charge of, correct? So we do have some guys that don't really pay attention. My rules with the HR are you can get your sandwich, you go back to work, okay? We got some guys that don't pay attention. A couple times they were like, I forgot. I clocked out for lunch. Can you clock me back in within a matter of 5 minutes? Yeah. So the next time, and you probably got it in your little books, it made it around half the city. I hung a thing, said, do not clock out for lunch this week. Pictures at 11 were sent. Okay? They come through my shop. They took pictures. It goes to the human resource lady. Or it went to Don. Don calls me in. I got to explain this. I explained it. He said, no problem. Case closed. Last week, it went to our new human resource lady. I had to explain it to her again. I said, it's 2024. Move on about your day. So I support your system. If they said right now, do you want to use it, don't want to use it, I would choose using it. But the control needs to go back to the managers. If I am here to support the city, as well as the people that work for you. On another side note, if you change that rule on you can't accumulate time, no one down below would ever have the benefit of working up. And I'd be the first one that goes with Christina, because with the time I got in, I got 3,000 hours of sick time. I'm gonna step down for that. I'll go back to an hourly worker. So just think of that, if you would, for the guys. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other department heads wish to say anything?
So I just had a couple questions, I guess, to change gears a little bit here. And I guess the answers to these questions I don't necessarily want answered in a public forum. Sorry, Brent, the IT supervisor for the city. So the questions that I had were in regards to security standards, since we weren't really involved in the implementation or any of the ongoing process of the timekeeping system. So with the cybersecurity policy, we have rules and stuff that we have to abide by. So questions in regards to what the security standards are, how they're enforced, such as password complexity, expiration of passwords, account protections, and how they align with city best practices. So additionally, how user actions are logged in the city or in the system, and who's responsible for reviewing those logs. So again, not something that we necessarily need to answer here today, but a point I wanted to bring up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I do not see any other department heads that wish to speak, so I would like to thank you all, and again, publicly, congratulations, Chief, on your upcoming retirement. All right, so with that being said, I want to bring it back to the committee on the two things that I wanted to recommend. recommendation number one coming out of this meeting, I would like to revise slightly in the recommendation that I would like to take to council. Yeah,
Should we take it to council or take it to Finer and HR? I mean, do we need to, are we really ready to go to council with recommendation? Or do we need to vet this a little bit and then get something that everybody understands and can stand behind, and then we make a recommendation to council? You think we're ready to go to council with a recommendation? I don't know. I'm not sure we are.
I guess my recommendation was that we went to the law director to draft a resolution.
Okay.
It
And that will
is-
be part of the vetting then?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well,
Is what I'm saying making sense, Mr. Feitner? You let me know when it doesn't. Okay, so recommendation number one is that we recommend collaboration with the law director to make salaried employees an assumed 40 hours with what they've banked currently and the accumulation thereof to continue. So the 40 hours is assumed and entered, and they will accumulate based on those 40 hours, and they will continue to bank with accordance of the current salary ordinance. Does that make sense?
One, if I could.
Speak freely, yes.
I think the issue we have is you cannot be both, correct? If you're an accepted employee, you no longer accrue vacation or sick time. I don't think we can divide that baby. Councilman, this is my concern.
If we make a resolution or ordinance that would change the current ordinance to allow for both, I believe that we get around that.
No.
Is it possible to change the ordinance in such a way that a salaried employee can accrue based on an assumed number of hours?
My understanding is an accepted employee cannot accrue vacation and sick time.
Not accepted, salaried. So we're not talking about an official designation.
I tell you, how about if we just
Take that one off the
approve?
table.
Well, what if we approve it and then they can come back with a
Well, and
a
that's, I
better-
guess, my recommendation is that we go to them
Okay, well, I will
to draft a
second.
resolution.
Yeah, I will second that then.
Got your question
And
answered.
then you can,
Well, you're at the microphone, of course you can.
No, I said if you don't have your question answered. Yeah, I was whispering with Law Director Feitner. I don't want to speak for him, but I think, yes, what needs to happen is a meeting to discuss what are the options, and we can get a clear picture of what is it you were asking, and come with how that works, the options available.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
And that's correct, and I like that because whatever that looks like, then we can have it checked ahead of time.
Right.
Make sure we're not violating anybody else's laws, and then let you guys select those options and or tweak them, so.
All right. So if I understand my wording to make this official, we're recommending that we work with Human Resources and the Law Director to draft a resolution that would allow for salary payments without clocking in and out.
okay. Genius. Are we voting this?
Yes, I need yays and nays. We'll start with Reed.
I'll second that.
Sorry, yes. On the recommendation.
I recommend it. Aye.
Mr. DeLong,
Aye.
Mr. DeArmond.
Aye.
And Mr. Phillips.
Aye.
I am also an aye, just so that's not assumed. My second recommendation coming out of today's meeting will be that we draft a resolution allowing for Human Resources to be added as an administrator to, again, working with Human Resources and the Law Director to draft a resolution to allow administrative access to Human Resources with the intent of getting the system implemented across the departments while also abiding by the salary ordinance.
question. Is your intention to give operational control to HR? Meaning
My
who would-
my
who would-
intent is to give an additional person. I do not wish to take it away from anyone. I would like to add an administrative role so that more people can be involved in the conversation and be able to do what needs to be done for the department heads.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So I would just ask for clarification on that. The intention of that is to allow an administrative representative to work with each of the departments to determine how they collect the information. Obviously, auditor's office still holds full responsibility of processing that information, but just giving her access is still not necessarily addressing the issue of management needs to be able to work with each department to determine the process flow. So if you can just kind of clarify that.
Yeah.
I need to add to that 733.12 and to redefine some clarification in terms of my roles, what I'm allowed to do. In that role, the city auditor's office, the city auditor, the fiscal officer defines the way, the format, the type of information that is required before those bills are paid, so that we would not give up that ability under Ohio statutes.
Thank you. Clarification to what you had to say in my recommendation is that we will still follow the salary ordinance and that the administration and department heads will report their hours. The way in which they will do it, they will work with human resources, with the auditor's office, with the different departments, and with the law director's office to make sure we are doing all such legally. But to maintain that there are checks and balances within that software implementation of an additional person in the administration. Does that provide clarity?
It does. I obviously still have concerns with how that will actually occur, but
I
appreciate you acknowledging.
I'm sure we all do. So I will bring the official recommendation that we add human resources as an administrative, I recommend that we work with the law director on drafting a resolution to add human resources as an administrator to be able to assist in the implementation process of this software.
I'll second that.
And let's start at the other end. Mr. Phillips.
Aye.
Mr. DeArmond.
Aye.
Mr. DeLong.
Aye.
Mr. Needles.
Aye.
I am also an aye. Does the committee have any other recommendations that they wish to bring out of this meeting?
Mr. President. I'm not sure this is legally accepted. That's a matter for the law director. I just think it seems that the spirit of the committee is to, at the end of the day, give the department heads and all of the workers more operational control of how all of this works. So if we can stress that going forward in some kind of language with the resolutions, I think that would be very important, so we don't end up here again in another year or two having the same conversation. Once again, I know there's a lot of research to do, but I think we have to walk away today with the idea of what our intention is, which, at least for me, and it sounds like the rest of the committee, is to satisfy the auditor's legal requirements while we don't hamstring or overburden department and city operations. It's unacceptable that we have 30-year employees that have to answer some of these questions. In my mind, there's a difference between accounting and accountability. And as long as we can focus on that, I think we'll be fine.
I agree. Thank you.
Anything else from the committee? All right, we're going to move forward with those two recommendations. I thank you all for your time and input today. It is 12:15 and we are adjourned.